Here are 10 things I wish I knew 10 years ago as a Catholic man. These 10 things are in no particular order, but I guarantee that if you start to implement these, you're going to notice tremendous changes in your life. You're going to have more confidence, and one day, God willing, you'll be able to be a better husband and a better father. So let's jump right in. But before I tell you what the first one is, I want to tell you a story about the time I was robbed. So I was teaching theology at a Catholic high school at the time. And I got home from work and I go into my house and I'm about to teach a guitar lesson to one of my students who came over for a half-hour guitar lesson. And I go into my house and I'm looking for my guitar and it's not where I thought it was. So I go into my roommate's room and I'm looking around. Maybe they took it, maybe they borrowed it, wanted to play it, whatever. Can't find it. I look in my own room. Maybe I left it in there, didn't realize it. Can't find it. Then I start looking around and I realize that there's other things missing. My roommate's guitar was also missing. So I make some phone calls to my roommates and turns out somebody broke in through our back door, took my guitar, my roommate's guitar, and a safe that my roommate had with his identity and a bunch of money in it and just bolted and left. So this is the first lesson that I wish I knew 10 years ago. It's that your injuries are opportunities to forgive and be forgiven. Look, all throughout the scriptures, we see this idea of blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. In the Our Father, it says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. What does that mean? It means that God's mercy towards us is modeled upon our mercy towards other people. So at that moment, I said a prayer and I forgave him totally from my heart and I prayed for his conversion. And that was a wonderful thing to do. I think God gave me the grace to be able to do that. But this was the icing on the cake for me. Through my studies, I then learned that, according to the majority of Western theologians, including St. Thomas Aquinas, the least suffering in purgatory is greater than the greatest suffering on earth. What does that mean? It means that if you were in the most pleasant place in all of purgatory, that would be worse than the martyrdom of St. Lawrence. And how was St. Lawrence killed? Well, they essentially grilled him. And the flames started to lick his flesh, the skin melted, and the subcutaneous fat started to drip into the fire beneath him, and you could hear it sizzle. Imagine that amount of pain. That is better than the most pleasant, most delightful place in purgatory. So whenever I was robbed, I forgave him totally and prayed for him to become very holy, holier than me, and to be forgiven by the Lord. And so that amount of mercy that I applied to him, the Lord will apply to me an even greater amount of mercy. So through me being robbed, actually could have saved me a ton of purgatory time. So every time that we're offended, if we can recognize it as not a slight, not something to be depressed about, but as coming from the Lord as an opportunity for us to show mercy so that he can have an excuse to show mercy on us, then we don't get angry as much. We're not upset about things. We're able to let it roll off our back like water on a duck's back, right? That's what it is. So that's number one. Your injuries are opportunities to forgive and be forgiven. And I want to share with you the second lesson by telling you the story of the time that I totaled my car. So I was on my way to work, and this was in August, and I was just driving along. And the guy in front of me, the guy in front of him, the guy in front of him, all these cars in front of me started slamming on their brakes. And I was not able to stop in time. I wasn't texting or messing with the radio or anything. I was actually praying the rosary while I was driving. But I slam on the brakes as quickly as I can. My car skids, stop. But then it doesn't stop in time. And I smash into the back of this Jeep Liberty. The Jeep Liberty pulls off to the side of the road. And I'm assuming the guy gets out of his car and looks at it. And I'm in the middle of the highway. And the front of my car is totally crumpled in. I try to start my car. It doesn't start. I'm looking around, I'm making sure I'm not in imminent danger of getting rear-ended. I make sure all of my stuff is okay, make sure I'm okay. And then I say, blessed be God. And this is the second point. God always turns your greatest catastrophes into your greatest blessings. So even though I rear-ended this guy, I ended up not getting a ticket because he just drove away and left the scene of the crime, which you're not supposed to do. So the cop came and decided, I'm not going to give you a ticket and I'm not going to give him a ticket. It's just going to be a no fault. So the insurance money then that was supposed to get me a new car, I ended up using it as the financial means that I needed to start this YouTube channel. Now I have more life flexibility, I have more time to spend with my wife and kids, and I get to preach the gospel and to help spread the Catholic truths throughout the entire world through this YouTube channel. And that's what I recognized right after I crashed my car. I said, "Blessed be God." I think that was a special inspiration of the Holy Ghost to recognize that even when this horrible thing had happened, something that could have ruined my entire day or week, I recognized that God's hand was in that, and he's going to take this and use it as something to make me holier, to make me better, to bring about more joy and not less joy in my life. So keep in mind that your greatest catastrophes will always be turned into your greatest blessings if you remain faithful. St. Augustine goes so far as to say this. He says, "Even our sins are turned by God to our good, for they humble us and make us more watchful." If you love God, then all things work for your good. That's revealed to us in Romans chapter 8. So look at everything that comes to you, your temptations, your trials, your faults, all of the things that you wish you could change about yourself. All of these things are coming to you from the Lord. And if you remain faithful to him and you continue to love him before all else, he will turn all of that to your advantage and make you better because of it. So to illustrate this third point to you, I want to share a story from Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa was in Calcutta in India. And if you know anything about India, they're predominantly Hindu. Hindus believe in reincarnation, which means that if you're a poor person in this life, it's because you were a dirtbag in your previous life. And if you're a rich person, it's because you earned that station. So because of this mentality in India, they have very little compassion upon poor people, which is why Mother Teresa went there to Calcutta. It's because they truly were the poorest of the poor, and their poverty was seen as something that they deserved, and they don't need to be helped from it. So that's where Mother Teresa goes. One day, Mother Teresa goes up to this wealthy man in India, and she asks for alms. She says, "Do you have anything for the poor?" This man then, with an audacity that I can't even imagine, spits in the face of Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa, being the saint that she is, remains composed, wipes the spit from her face, and says, "That was for me. Now, do you have anything for the poor?" This man was so moved by Mother Teresa's self-control that even though he didn't really support what she was doing, he gave her a large sum of money. So this is point number 3. You're not as bad as you think. You're actually much worse. The saints from St. Maria Faustina, St. Mother Teresa, St. Augustine, etc. Pick any saint that you want, and they will all say the same thing. They'll say with St. Paul, "I am the greatest of sinners." That's the mentality that we have to have if we actually want to be holy. And this is why it's the case, because what Jesus said is true. He says, "Without me, you can do nothing." Without either the natural or supernatural aid of God, you can do nothing, which means what? Everything that's in you that's good and holy and desirable is from God. And all you've done by yourself without God's help, all that you've done is deform that, mutilate it, make it ugly, and make it bad. So inside of each person, there is what God is doing in them and what they are doing in themselves. You need to recognize that you are the greatest sinner imaginable if you consider what you've done to yourself. You are the chief of sinners, just like St. Paul. However, in you as well is the grace of God and the natural gifts that he has given you. That's what God is doing in you. So recognize in true humility, you're not as bad as you think. You're actually much worse. That's what you're doing to yourself. And that you are actually much stronger than you could even imagine. And that is what God is doing in you, because power is made perfect in weakness. So that's point number 3. You're not as bad as you think. You're actually much worse. So point number 4, and this one is a little counterintuitive, but it's the worst day of your life will be the day that you get exactly what you wanted. What do I mean by that? Well, to illustrate this point, I want to quote Blaise Pascal. He says this. He says, "If one were to offer a gambler all the money he wanted to stop playing, he would refuse. Or if he accepted, he would gamble it away." Blaise Pascal is making the observation that What a gambler wants is not money. Usually, somebody that's really addicted to gambling, they don't want money. What they want is the hope that money will make them happy. So he says, if you gave a gambler, you just asked them, how much money do you hope to win from gambling? And they said $100 million. And then you said, I will give you $100 million if you promise to quit gambling today. Pascal says either they would say, no, I don't want the money, I'd rather keep my gambling addiction, or they will take that $100 million and gamble it away. Because what a gambler wants is not money. What they want is the hope that money will make them happy. So what does this mean? Well, in this life, we are designed to hope for happiness, not to actually attain it. And so the day that you get the thing that you thought you always wanted, you will realize that it doesn't satisfy you. The day that you win the championship, the day that you get the promotion, get the amount of money that you want, get the wife that you've always dreamed of, the day that you get that will be the day that you realize it will never satisfy your heart. You were not designed for any created good. You were designed for God Himself. So the worst day of your life will be the day in which you triumph and you realize it wasn't what you thought it was. It's just disappointment. So we need to reorient ourselves and focus entirely on Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Give our hearts to Him because He is the only person who can satisfy our deepest desires. Point number 5 has to do a little bit with demons. So Father Ripperger tells a story about how he went into a house and it was infested, meaning that it was basically like a haunted house. The demons were messing with stuff, the demons were making noises, etc., all that junk. During the course of this investigation, Father Ripperger determined that the demons had permission to be there, even though they didn't have the right to be there. So Father Ripperger composed a consecration prayer where the owner of that house essentially recognized their natural law authority over their possessions and then consecrated it to the Blessed Virgin Mary. And he said immediately, all the demonic activity stopped. So this is the point. If something belongs to Mary, it does not belong to Satan. So if you are tempted in any area specifically, let's say you're tempted by your emotions and you're tempted to anger, what you need to do is consecrate your emotions, specifically the emotions in which you're failing, to the Blessed Virgin Mary. And that will liberate you from any demonic influence in that area. If you feel like you're struggling with your finances, consecrate your finances to Mary and trust her to take care of it. If you feel like you're struggling in your marriage, consecrate your marriage to the Blessed Virgin Mary, because if it belongs to Mary, it does not belong to the evil one. The 6th point also has to do with demons. Let me tell you a brief story. So if you've ever seen the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose, that's actually based off of a true story that has to do with a young woman named Annalise Michel. If you've seen the movie, then you see that this young woman gets possessed and the priest is trying to liberate her and she ends up dying due to malnourishment. Well, the movie gets some things right, but it gets a lot of things wrong. What actually happened to Annalise Michel is that she was at first possessed. The exorcists came and prayed over her, and she was eventually liberated. And this is where it gets interesting. After her first liberation, either our Lord or Our Lady appears to her and asks her, will you freely choose to undergo possession again and all of the horrors of those demonic influences for the sake of sanctifying souls through your suffering and for the sake of making the wiles of the demons more publicly known? And Annalise Michel, in a very humble way, says yes. So she is possessed again. Because this possession is so bad, she does end up dying from what appears to be malnourishment. But our Lord appears to her before she passes away and tells her that one day she will be raised to the altar, which means canonized a saint. So this is the point. That's a very depressing and sad story if you look at it from the outset. But the point is that the demons work for God. And oftentimes, whenever they tempt us, they are tempting us, and God is using that temptation as the means of our sanctification. If you look at Annalise Michel, God is going to make her a saint, not in spite of the fact that she was possessed and struggled with demons, but because of the fact that she was possessed and struggled with demons and suffered that well and embraced her cross well. St. Jerome, in some of his writings, calls the demons our sparring partners. The point is that we're supposed to wrestle with them and through the conflict become stronger. This is what Augustine says. He says, the devil, that old serpent, even if he does not will it, serves by his temptations the designs of divine providence, because the just man grows stronger by resisting them. The demons work for God, and they're on a very short leash. If you are tempted and you endure that temptation well, then you will become holier. This is why St. James in the inspired scriptures says, blessed is the man who endures temptation. God uses everything, even the demons, to sanctify his saints. This next one, I wish I had heard when I was a lot younger, because I would be so much smarter and so much more ahead of the game than I am now. But this is the point. Intelligence is a race. What do I mean by that? Well, if somebody has the intelligence of an 8-year-old, an average 8-year-old, but they're 4 years old, then you would say that child is incredibly intelligent. If somebody has the intelligence of an 8-year-old, but they're 15, then you would say that that person is very dull. What intelligence is it's how fast you can assimilate the knowledge, how fast you can pick up on patterns, how fast you can get the maximum amount of knowledge into your head. So if you want to be smart, you have to stop viewing it as getting a comprehensive grasp on just this one little tiny thing and start viewing it as a race to get as much information as you possibly can as quickly as possible. And it's so advantageous to learn things while you're young, because if you know something at the age of 17, well, you have that knowledge until the day that you die, which means what? You've essentially put another tool in your tool belt that you have access to now for the next 60, 70, 80 years until you pass away. So the quicker you learn something, the more useful it is throughout your entire life. Intelligence is a race. Learn as much as you can and learn as quickly as you can. Prioritize that and it'll pay off dividends for the rest of your life. Which leads us right into point number 8. If you want to learn something, start by reading 3 books on the exact same subject. And here's why. Because every time you read a book, the author is going to go through and give you an outline of the material they're covering and give you a sort of zoomed out approach so that whenever they zoom in, they can look at this or that detail. If you read 3 books on, let's say, neuroscience, I did this actually. If you read 3 books on neuroscience, each of those 3 authors is going to explain, let's say, how dopamine works. And the first time that you read it, you may think, oh, wow, this is new. I'm learning a lot. I'm not getting all this. Maybe I should reread it. Maybe I should go back. Maybe I just need to slow down. Don't do that. Rather, push through, recognize the fact that I'm not going to get this perfectly in the first time, and that's okay. And then read the second book about neuroscience. And the second author is going to do a similar thing. He's going to explain what dopamine is, how it works, and how it affects you. And the second time, you're going to go through and be like, oh, this is mostly review. Oh, that's what the first author was trying to say. I like the way he explains it better, and I have some background information already, so this is easy. And the second book you read about neuroscience is going to be cake, and I would recommend reading them quickly. But then you get to the third book, and the third book is easy to read. It's almost entirely a review of dopamine in this case, and you get it easily, and it ensconces itself in your memory. So treat intelligence as a race, and if you want to learn about anything, read 3 books about it basically as quickly as you can. And that leads us to point number 9. If you want to be wise, you have to do this. So there's this idea in the early church that fasting is to the soul what food is to the body. So let me tell you a story from my own life. I ended up graduating college a year early just because I was able to blast through my classes as quickly as I could. That next year, I went back and I was working for my parents and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I ended up entering into seminary. But while I was with my parents, all my friends were still at college, which meant what? It meant that for a year, I didn't have any of my usual friends around. So I spent a lot of time in isolation. I was fasting from friendship, and I did a lot of fasting from food as well. I would come home after work, go up into my room, and read something like the Confessions of St. Augustine or some of the church fathers for a couple hours. And through that fast, through removing myself from sensory overload, from pleasures of food, from pleasures of friend, I was able to really dive into a lot of the theology of the early church. and I was able to understand it well, because this is the way that it works. If you want to enjoy spiritual pleasures, then you have to remove yourself from physical pleasures. The more you are attached to physical pleasures, the less you will be attached to spiritual ones, and vice versa. So if you really want to dive deep into theology, into the fathers, into wisdom, you have to incorporate fasting into your day in some way. You have to deny yourself of the pleasures that you're accustomed to having. And point number 10, and this is a really important one, the way that you treat others is the way that God will treat you. This is why in the scriptures, Jesus says, do not judge, and you will not be judged. He says, the measure with which you measure shall be measured out unto you. Whenever you have an opportunity to be impatient or rude to somebody, or to judge them, or to condemn them, remember that if you condemn them, you are condemning yourself. Remember that if you speak ill of somebody else and curse them, then God will curse you. The measure with which you measure shall be measured out unto you. So be kind and gentle and humble to everybody that you meet throughout the entire world, and God will be kind and gentle and humble to you. And that goes especially for my viewers on YouTube. Please remember to be gentle and charitable and kind with people who you disagree with in the comments. Or to put it another way, straight from the scriptures, forgive and you will be forgiven. Be merciful and you shall obtain mercy. So if you enjoyed that and you want to learn a ton more and you want to be really, really intentional about becoming the man that God is calling you to be, then what I want you to do is click on the link in the description and fill out that survey. My mission in life is to help young men to become good, saintly, holy husbands and fathers. Because Our Lady of Fatima said the final battle between the kingdom of heaven and Satan is over marriage and the family. And if we want to win marriage, we have to win fatherhood. So if you're a young man and you want to grow in virtue, click on the link in the description, fill out that survey, and we'll talk soon. God bless.